Welcome to the Wolverine Recruiting Show. I am Clayton Sayfie with Holland. We are from thewolverine.com. You can check our premium content out over there using the promo code BLUE60 for 2 months for free. Also, thank you to our sponsors, Lewis Jewelers. Kind of a busy week here because we have a big decision upcoming for Michigan in the recruiting world, and let's get into that first with our first topic. Will Johnson, the five-star corner out of Grosse Pointe South, right in the Detroit area here, is set to make his decision. Primary contenders being USC, Ohio State, obviously, and then Michigan. His dad, Dion, played at Michigan as a defensive back, so you got the strong ties there. He's a legacy kid. Your thoughts going into the weekend here, set to make his decision on Sunday?
Yeah, I have my future cast pick on Michigan. I have no reason to take it off right now. So I think the Wolverines can close and will close with Will Johnson. At the same time, anytime you have such a high profile recruitment, there's always a little creep of doubt. Will narrowed it down to a top three of Michigan, Ohio State, and USC. I would say Ohio State's running third right now, despite the defensive back production and the winning and everything that comes with Ohio State. I don't feel like Will's really jived as well with the Buckeyes as he has with both Michigan and USC. So I would say USC is actually the biggest threat to Michigan right now. USC has done a really good job of recruiting him. He actually made a trip out to Los Angeles this past month, I believe, in January. So he had a chance to check out the campus. He hung out with good friend and USC commit Damani Jackson. He even went over and had dinner at his house and everything. So they're really good friends. Before Damani committed, obviously there was a lot of talk about package deals and potentially, both ending up in Michigan. Now Damani's at USC. And so that's playing a role with Will. On top of that, USC has an elite recruiter in Dante Williams, who is arguably the best recruiter out west. And I know Dante's been on Will really hard over the last several days. And so USC is giving him a lot to think about. It's a new opportunity away from home. Obviously, LA is a lot different than the Detroit metro area. And, Will and I kind of joked about it when we sat down with him, both me and you did, over at the Sound Mind Sound Body camp recently. And so, I think Will is a little more of a homebody in the sense that he kind of fits that Midwest culture and he's always wanted to stay close to home. But at the same time, I think actually going out there and seeing things and kind of broadening his horizons is a little appealing to him. But again, I think Michigan just makes the most sense. He has been around the program his whole life with his father having played there. He went to games as a kid. He obviously took the self-guided tour of Michigan during the big visit weekend, got to hang out with some of the commits and now signees in the 2021 class. He, has really bonded with the new coaching staff, Maurice Linguist, Ron Bellamy, have both really been involved, Mike Hart as well. And then you have, the usual suspects like head coach Jim Harbaugh and area recruiter Sharon Moore. So it's been a real team effort from the Michigan side. And I think there's just that comfort factor for Will where he just really likes what Michigan has to offer, both culturally and relationship wise and just fit wise. I think Will, in a sense, not personality wise, but just where his heart is at, where his head is at, kind of reminds me of Donovan Edwards. I put in a future cast pick very early for Donovan to end up at Michigan. And even when there was talk about Donovan committing to Ohio State, I never changed my pick. I just always felt like he was going to end up at Michigan because that's kind of what he gave off. He gave off that vibe. And so Will gives off a similar vibe when he talks about Michigan. And so I think it makes a lot of sense. And, Will's a must land for Michigan. I mean, not only is he a legacy recruit, but he's a supreme talent, extremely long. I mean, we make all these Richard Sherman comparisons that are unwarranted. That is warranted for Will Johnson. He completely locks down his side of the field. Clayton, you had a chance to see him this season as well. He's completely dominant. Other teams don't even throw to his side. Again, he's just so long. He's physical. He's an underrated athlete. If you look at his basketball tape, he can hoop too. So, Will's everything you want in a Big Ten cornerback. And so Michigan has to absolutely land him. I mean, losing Will Johnson would be the biggest blow of the class, even though it's really early, just because he is a 5-star guy and he's a legacy recruit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to say it would almost feel like a flip in a way. Like Will's obviously not committed to Michigan, but it would be a blow to lose him. You don't say that about every kid, especially a 5-star. You're chasing several 5-stars, throughout a cycle, but if you don't land them, you don't necessarily think it's a huge blow if you're a place like Michigan that only gets a handful every couple of years of these types of guys. But one that's in your backyard that has a dad that played for Michigan, that grew up with probably Michigan gear and, fan items all over the house. Like, you got to keep those types of kids home. And I think, the Michigan staff probably has done, based on kind of what you've said, like an outstanding job over the last month or so since they've got that staff set. And you have to land him, like you said. And, I think it looks good for Michigan at this point. Quick thoughts on just what the staff has done with, you mentioned the full team effort, but the fact that it seemed like it was in disarray a little bit over the holidays. Then you get the Jim Harbaugh extension. Then you get all the assistants coming in. They've brought in 6 new assistant coaches. He's been the top priority, but just your thoughts on what the new staff has done, including Mo Linguist, over the past month before we moved on to Jaden Gould's top 6.
But yeah, Mo Linguist is already an elite level recruiter. He knows how to land top defensive backs. I've said it before. During his time at Texas A&M, he had 3 top 100 defensive backs committed in one cycle, and then the following cycle, he came back and landed a 5-star corner. So he's landed Will Johnson level cornerbacks in the past. He knows how to pitch them, how to recruit them, and on top of that, he also can now sell that he coached for America's team. He coached for the Dallas Cowboys last season. And, Linguist has always been praised as a developer of talent. And that's a big thing for Will. Look, Will's a smart kid. He knows exactly what he's looking for. And I feel like the biggest factor for Will is who can develop me into the NFL guy, into the guy that can be a top 10 draft pick. And I think he understands that Linguist, with his resume, with his background, his experience, can do that. And then you also have, new defensive coordinator, Mike Macdonald. Will, I believe, was the first recruit that Macdonald texted once he took the job at Michigan, and he's coming straight from the NFL. So I think, these guys are selling their NFL experience to Will, which is really appealing. And then you have guys with local ties like Mike Hart and Ron Bellamy that are not only recruiting Will, but are also recruiting his father, Dion, who, again, played at Michigan, but also is the co-founder of Sound Mind, Sound Body, which is a program that really helps the youth in the Detroit metro area. They, provide training, camps, 7-on-7. And the other co-founder is Curtis Blackwell, former director of recruiting at Michigan State. And Curtis is actually Will Johnson's godfather. So having Curtis in your corner only helps. And I feel like he and Ron Bellamy and Mike Hart, they have a great relationship there as well. So the relationship building from Hart and Bellamy goes a long way. The experience from Mo Linguist, Mike Macdonald, and obviously Jim Harbaugh as well goes a long way. And then you also throw in Sharon Moore, who is kind of an ace recruiter in his own right. And he's helping out as well. So, the pitch is that, the NFL experience, the development, being the face of the program, being the face of the class. That's always been important to Will too, is committing early. I've always reported Will's going to commit early. Will's going to commit early. And people were always like, he probably will push it back. No, like, he is set on being the leader of a class. Once he's committed, he's done. And Dion's told me that over and over again as well. So he and his family want to commit to a school and be those in the front line helping lure talent to whatever school they land. And if it's Michigan, obviously that's huge for the program.
Yeah, it'd be massive to have, you saw it with J.J. McCarthy and how good of a job he did being the vocal guy of the 2021 class. If it's Will Johnson this early in the cycle at that position of cornerback and, this highly touted of a kid, to have him as the leader is would be absolutely massive. And like you said, for whatever school that lands him, it certainly would be. But if it's Michigan, probably even more so, with just the way that he is tied into this program, if he so chooses the Wolverines. Next thing, bit of news this week is Jaden Gould, the 4-star corner in 2022. It could be a very good defensive back class here if Michigan closes with some of its targets. But he comes out with his top 6, so we can take a look at it here. But Michigan obviously in the mix there, heavily involved with him. Notre Dame, Penn State, Rutgers, Clemson, and USC being the others. Your thought on him kind of trimming things down, and obviously Michigan being in the mix?
Yeah, Jaden's looking to commit at some point in the near future as well, probably towards the end of spring. He's a guy that I've been really, really high on, and I'm surprised he's not in the Rivals 250. I mean, to me, he's a clear top 250 prospect. I look at Jaden Gould in the same mold as a guy like Miles Rouser, who's in the top 250. I think they have a really similar skill set. I think they can play various positions in the secondary. I think they're both really, really good talents. But I would give Jaden Gould, I would rather take Jaden Gould than Rouser. I would give him a slight bump, and that's not a knock on Rouser. I think they're both top 200 players. But I'm just saying that Gould is underrated from the sense of a rankings perspective. I went out and I saw him live in New Jersey, and he just checks all the boxes. He's built like a safety, moves like a corner, can play the nickel. I mean, this is a guy you can just move all around the secondary. He's actually, in constant contact with Will Johnson. So, they've talked a little bit about linking up and playing with each other. And, Will Johnson's kind of turning into a recruiting analyst himself. He's always texting me about looking at guys' film and how he feels he can fit in with certain guys. Like Will went back and watched Taylor Groves. He went back and watched Cody Jones. I know he's seen Jaden Gould, and I think Jaden's film actually earned Will's respect. So I think that speaks volumes, of what Jaden brings to the table as well. When another elite recruit also recognizes your talent. But overall, I feel like Michigan is in a great spot for Jaden, especially if they land Will. I think will be instrumental in helping Michigan lure Gould over. I do think there is a bit of, I don't want to necessarily say friction, but just a little bit of uncertainty from Jaden's coaching staff, just because his head coach is Vito Campanelli, who is the brother of Anthony Campanelli. And then last week, we had some controversy on our message board where it was reported that Michigan hadn't talked to Jaden at all, and this was coming from his coach. And, that's not necessarily true. Michigan did reoffer Jaden. They do like him. Linguist has talked to him. McDonald has talked to him. So they are going after Jaden, and I do feel like he is a prospect they can land. Michigan offered him extremely early. And like I said, they re-offered him. He's been to campus many times. I believe he's been to Michigan more than any other program. And he is starting to build a really good relationship with the new coaching staff. So right now, I feel like Michigan's in a really good spot. I think Notre Dame is another school to really watch. The Irish are probably the clubhouse leaders for his teammate and 4-star quarterback Steve Angeli. So I think that helps. I think Notre Dame has a really good relationship with the coaching staff at Bergen Catholic as well. I think Clemson, if they make a really concerted effort, will be a big factor. That's a school he's always wanted to see. And then USC is the other one that really sticks out to me as well, just because Jaden's always talked about visiting USC even before, Damani committed, and Damani's recruiting, Jaden as well. That's a program that he's always been high on and has always wanted to visit. So I think he'll take a trip out there. Penn State is a regional school that he really likes as well. And then Rutgers is the home state school, and they're obviously making him a top priority. But overall, I feel like it's Michigan, Notre Dame, and then USC. And depending on what Clemson does, they could move up the list with Rutgers and Penn State pretty much rounding out the top 6. Right now, I have my future cast pick in for Michigan. So we'll just see how the new staff continues to develop their relationship with Jaden.
And then the last thing for this week's recruiting show is obviously everybody seeing how the staff shakeup for Michigan is not complete. Well, it probably is now, but it wasn't as of a week ago with Brian Jean Mary leaving as the linebackers coach. That causes this domino effect that includes a new quarterbacks coach in Matt Weiss. He comes in from the Baltimore Ravens. Then you move Ron Bellamy from wide receivers over to safeties. George Hilo moves down from safeties to linebackers. Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator, will take over the wide receivers fully, and that's where he's been. He's been leading the wide receiver room the last couple of years. But this domino effect and its impact on recruiting, how have you kind of seen it play out? And now the days following some more shakeup on Michigan staff.
Bringing in Weiss is interesting just because he is more of a strategic analytics guy, as you pointed out when they first brought him in. I don't really know what he brings from a recruiting standpoint because he's never really done it. He is young and energetic. I think he'll kind of tag team with Harbaugh as they continue to sort through a weak year of 2022 quarterbacks. But more importantly, losing Brian Jean Mary hurts. I feel like he was one of the stronger recruiters on staff. He identified and had built great relationships with guys like Sebastian Cheeks and Jalen Sneed. And, now those guys have lost their point of contact. And I think that hurts. And he was, I think, going to be a great complement to Maurice Linguist recruiting down south. He did a great job with Junior Colson last cycle. He was instrumental in helping land Jaden Hood out of Florida. And Brian Jean Mary was a big guy in Florida. I mean, he has strong ties there. And so overall, I think, the writing was on the wall. Obviously, Michigan tried to replace him earlier when they had the entire staff shakeup on the defensive side of the ball. He interviewed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so I feel like, it was kind of coming. It was, but it's still, I see it as a loss. Even though Michigan was trying to replace him, it was more so because of the connections that this new staff had. They wanted kind of some fresh faces on the defensive side of the ball. Jean Mary wasn't, part of that. But at the same time, I mean, you can't dismiss what he brought to the table as a recruiter. And, Jean Mary didn't have the benefit of spring ball. Obviously, nobody did. But he didn't move to Ann Arbor until June. Don Brown had a lot of control over the linebackers. So I thought this was going to be the year where, okay, Jean Mary has settled in. He's going to take the next step as a recruiter and really show what he can do, because I covered him at Texas under Charlie Strong, and he was the Sharon Moore of that staff at the time. And then I thought he was going to take the next step as a coach. Now that he's settled in, he's moved to Ann Arbor. He has more control of the linebackers with Don Brown out. But obviously that didn't happen. And then it causes the shakeup of, Ron Bellamy moving over to safeties, which I thought was an interesting move. I think wide receivers recruiting will probably be fine. Obviously, Josh Gaddis did it last cycle and has done it at Michigan. So, I'm not too worried about that. But at the same time, I thought that it was good to have Ron Bellamy in that position because he was a wide receiver at Michigan, and that was a nice selling point. He took some recruiting burden off of Josh Gaddis, which would allow him to focus more on the field. And he was already developing really, really good relationships with a lot of receivers in the class. He's a big reason Texas wide receiver Nick Anderson's making a self-guided tour of Michigan soon. So I do think it's a weird move to move him to safeties, but with bringing on Weiss, you had to have another defensive coach. I mean, it would have been completely unbalanced. And then Hilo to linebackers is completely fine just because he coached linebackers at Maryland, and he's going to do great recruiting linebackers. So I'm not worried about Hilo replacing Jean Mary. I think Hilo is going to turn out to be a really good recruiter. It's more so just having less familiarity for these recruits early in the cycle, and especially when you look at what recruits are doing. They're committing a lot earlier. So when your school has constant change, It's off-putting to recruits that are trying to lock up spots as the dead period keeps getting extended. So if you're a safety recruit, right, if you're Keon Saab, for example, you've had Bob Shoop recruit you. You've had a Sean Larkins recruit you. You've had George Hilo recruit you. You now have Ron Bellamy recruit you. You've had 4 primary position coach recruiters, and it is February. And so I'm not saying Weiss is a bad hire at all. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm looking at this through a recruiting lens. Weiss could end up being a great hire from a game management standpoint, from an analytics standpoint. It could pay dividends in the fall on the field. But from a recruiting perspective, the staff shakeup, I feel like hurts a bit just because these guys are getting new position coach recruiters all the time. The linebackers lost Don Brown. They now lost Brian G. Mary, so they have to get used to Hilo. The safety recruits that just got offered were being recruited by Hilo and now have to transition to a new position coach again for the 4th time. And then, the wide receivers that were just offered, Bellamy's going over to safety, so now they have to get to know Josh Gaddis. And so it's so much movement. And I think now it's all settled. And so we'll kind of go from here now that it's completely locked in, now that the staff won't have any more movement. But anytime you have movement coupled with what went on with Jim Harbaugh's contract situation, you're going to have some issues with certain recruits. But again, with all that said, this is a recruiting perspective. On the field, Michigan needs to win. Jim Harbaugh knows he needs to win. So if you lose a couple of recruits, I think it's all right, because you need to make sure your job is secured. You need to make sure that you pick up wins on the football field.
Yeah, I think that's important. And wins on the football field will then affect recruiting. And, it's just kind of that cycle. But it is certainly interesting. And I think the timing is the worst part of this, because spring ball started on Monday as well. So Matt Weiss had to come in Sunday. That's when he got hired. And, you just look at the effect that is now having on recruiting with the domino effect. If they would have hired just a linebackers coach to replace Brian Jean Mary, it would have been less of, craziness in terms of recruiting, and with guys actually in the building having their position coach. But it is what it is. And like you said, it could pay dividends. Let's say he ends up being the missing piece that they need or whatever. Then, none of this will matter. But for now, it does suck for some of the recruits and the players that it had to happen like this. But again, if you got the right 10 assistant coaches in that building, then I guess it ends up being the right decision. And we'll just have to wait and see on that. But that is it for our show. We will see everyone next week. Check us out at thewolverine.com. Once again, Will Johnson committing to either Michigan, USC, or Ohio State on Sunday. So if it is Michigan, check us out using the promo code BLUE60 to get all of our premium content. And we'll see you next week.